Welcome into the Thunder Basketball Universe presented by COOP Ale Works. You might notice we are coming to you from a Zoom setup here today, and that's because the Thunder is in the middle of Summer League. So we've got some folks on the ground in Salt Lake City right now, namely our very own Nick Gallo and Royce Young, who is joining us yet again today. And guys, we have a lot to cover. This is the first time we've been able to see the rookies in action and the first time we've seen the team really in action in quite some time. You guys are boots on the ground. You're seeing this firsthand. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What's going on over there in Salt Lake?
It's a ton of great work on the floor. The guys are taking this very seriously. And what I mean by that is not like being worried about whether they've won. Yes, they've won the first two games here. It's not necessarily whether they've been, efficient in terms of their scoring outputs, but very serious about attacking the program, attacking the team strategy, and fitting themselves into that. I think that can most easily be seen on the defensive side of the ball. This Thunder squad has held both of its opponents well below 40% shooting from the field, very stout defensive efforts, and you see the proper rotations, really good closeouts, extra efforts, second chance efforts on both sides of the ball, and then great rebounding numbers in both games as well. So I think what you're seeing is effort, intensity, focus, and in a summer league situation, you think years back, over the last decade or so, and the approach that teams take to summer league has only enhanced and enhanced. It used to be more like pickup games, and now it is certainly not that.
And you see the Thunder taking advantage of that. Obviously, 2 summer league stints for this team. The first one in Salt Lake City, where you guys are right now. And then after this next game, we're actually recording this on Thursday, July 7th. The Thunder has their last game in Salt Lake City tonight before flying out to Las Vegas for another 5-game stretch of summer league. Big development season for this crew. And Royce, I got to get your opinion on this too. You'll be in both spots for the Thunder. What have you seen so far from these guys in terms of how they're approaching their development right now?
Yeah, so much of what Nick said, Paris, and it has, this is my first summer league with the team, and seeing it up close and personal, and just the approach to it. I think kind of again what Nick said, summer league has changed so drastically, I think, over the years, and I really think you can even look back to just the way the Thunder approached it back when they were going to Orlando at the time. Like it has just increased more and more, where there's that alignment from the top all the way to the bottom, where you're really stressing the continuity of the roster, but also just the continuity of the organization. And I think, one of the things that has been really neat to see is how the Thunder have this is kind of the introduction to the NBA for these rookies specifically too. It's not just about getting them on the court. I know everybody's excited to see Chet Holmgren and Jalen and Usman and what they can do. But at the same time, for those guys, it's about like, this is how you, take an NBA road trip. This is where you drop your bag off. This is, how you get on the plane. This is where you eat lunch. This is how film goes on the road. So, I think there's a lot of that stuff. And then on top of it, you're just kind of trying to build some chemistry, camaraderie, all that sort of stuff. Learn what time the bus leaves. I mean, so it really is a lot more simple than I think a lot of people necessarily think, because this is the first week on the job for these young guys, and they're 19, 20 years old. I mean, imagine showing up to a high leverage, high intensity profession at that age, and you got to learn everything on the fly there. I remember my first day of work right out of college. It was like I was scared to go ask my boss what the Wi-Fi password was, And so, like, I assume that there's some of those elements there where you're trying to learn that stuff, and but it's been cool to see, and just how everybody has really kind of, I think, gone above and beyond to make sure that everybody feels, very welcomed and part of it too. Has been cool to see.
I know there are a lot of different elements at play for really everybody in Summer League, including you guys. You guys were actually on the call, on the radio broadcast for these first 2 games. So who better to help recap kind of what we've seen so far than you two, who have, been ingrained this entire time. Let's look back. 2 very different games for this group. First game against Utah, kind of the home team of this Salt Lake City Summer League, and then to Memphis. And Memphis had a lot more kind of NBA ready players. It's 2 very different opponents. What were your kind of biggest takeaways from these 2 games? Gallo, let's start with you.
Yeah, game flow, I think, was massive. This is something Royce and I actually talked about on the air last night during the Memphis game, is that first game against Utah, first of all, the stands were completely filled. It was the home team. Their crowd was a little bit more rowdy than maybe the next night's crowd. And there's so much buzz in the building. Obviously, everyone's so excited to see some of the Thunder's players that were there, high draft picks, 3 lottery picks out there for the Thunder. And then, that game just went so smoothly for OKC. There was this great rhythm and flow to that game, lots of energy, great pace. And then the next night was just this sort of like plodding, bruising game. And Royce, I know, like, as you and I were calling it, it felt like a different animal. And I think it was a good sign that the Thunder was able to navigate both of those styles of play.
Yeah, it was interesting, Nick. And I swear that both teams got like 10 extra timeouts in last night's game too. It just felt like that they're, right when you started to feel a little bit of flow, one of the other coaches would be like, nope, no more flow, timeout. And so a lot of that stuff got cut off. But yeah, exactly that. The first game felt very much like an NBA game, even though, like you said, Paris, Utah didn't really have a whole lot of NBA roster guys out on the floor at that time. Obviously, the Thunder do. They have so many players that have NBA experience. And I think that really showed just in kind of the preparation and how ready a lot of the team was schematically to get out on the court and really just kind of start executing right away. And again, I think that's what's really good for these young players, the 4 rookies specifically, is that you can kind of just drop them in there. And that's so much of what the focus is here, is that they're not asking Chet Holmgren to go out there and be this 30 and 10 guy. It's just go out there and do your job, fit in, play your role, and imagine what this is going to look like when you put the rest of the parts of the roster in alongside with it. So, that the same goes for J-Dub, J-Will, and Usman. So I think that's kind of, that first game really kind of had that feel to it, is that it felt very much like an NBA game. We were talking about it last night at dinner, that the Memphis game just felt like a summer league game.
Yeah.
It was choppy. It was a little bit erratic. Some of the shot selection, I thought, specifically Memphis, like they took a lot of early clock shots. You got to give Nick a lot of shout out for his job on the call, because it was hard to gain the flow on top of there being so many Williamses on the rosters. And there was 2 Waters on the rosters guarding each other at one time. It was ridiculous. On top of a lot of guys that you're just not familiar with, that you can't eyeball and say, oh, I know who that is. Nick was having to look down and say, okay, who's number 5? Who's number 9? I mean, Nick did a heck of a job on the call.
If I can just add to the point that Royce is making, though, about basically the continuity, the fact that there were so many guys out there for the Thunder that have played heavy NBA minutes. It's not just, a couple minutes here and there and mostly G League action. I mean, you looked at the guys on the floor, from Josh Giddey to Poku to Jeremiah Robinson Earl to Aaron Wiggins, Vit Krejci. I mean, these guys have logged heavy NBA minutes. And so I think that really demonstrated itself on the floor. And as Royce is pointing out, when you mix in these rookies who are getting their first taste of NBA time, it's so essential to have like actual functional NBA players, guys that are in the right position, that are in, properly executing a system. Because as Sam Presti, the GM, often says, sometimes when you throw 5 rookies or really young guys out there with no structure, no system, it's like pouring water on a table. I mean, everything is just going everywhere. But when you've got guys, I think of a guy like Poku, this is now heading into his 3rd NBA season. He's going to be in the right places at the right time defensively. We saw him, get a couple weak side steals, just being in the right place. Like those things, that structure really, really helps a guy like Ousmane Dieng, who is 19 years old and like just getting, his head on straight in terms of figuring out what the NBA style is like.
Yeah, and I want to go back to that Memphis game. Royce, you pointed out that there wasn't really much of a flow to it, but that game in particular, the thing that stood out the most to me was that was kind of the first time we got to see these guys have to really, change course in the middle of the game, right? And kind of reorganize themselves and get back on track. Things were going great for them, and then Memphis would go on a run and really test them and push them and really shift things up. And so you got to see how they kind of navigated that. And I think, Nick, to your point, having guys out there like Josh, like Poku, like Aaron, the JRE, these guys who have already been in the fray, who have had to do this kind of recalibration mid-game, right in the middle of a quarter or right in the middle of a run, really help to kind of solidify things and help them stay on top and stay on the right track.
Well, there was adjustments to be made too, kind of to your point, Paris, that, I think of just the way that Memphis came out with Kenneth Lofton Jr., undrafted player, and he's a 2-way guy for Memphis. He's a very unique player, very left-hand heavy, shorter, at least in terms of an NBA big man, but he's a big guy. So
6'6", 275 pounds.
Yeah, I mean he's built like truly like a defensive end. So he plays a unique style too. You don't see that type of guy all that often in the NBA. And he came out and he was clearly trying to go at Chet Holmgren, as a lot of players are going to. He's the number 2 overall pick, and he's hyped up, had a huge debut, and Lofton tried to kind of go at Holmgren, and there was some adjustments to be made there. And at a few different times, the guards kind of tried to sneak in on the baseline when Lofton had his back turned. They were kind of shadow doubling him a little bit. So there, is that sort of thing that you're going to see in an NBA game where you're going to have to just adapt and adjust throughout it. But one thing I did want to also say, just kind of what Nick was talking about, there's such a value in having a player like Josh Giddey here, and how much he has just clearly stood above so many other players. I mean, he is so clearly, not just an NBA player, but like a really, really good NBA player. And you can just see it so blatantly. But, the intentionality of having a guy like Josh, like, does Josh Giddey need to be playing in Summer League? Probably not. But like having him there to integrate a lot of the players, the 4 rookies and some of the other guys is such a smart choice, just because you can really hit the ground running there. Obviously you want to start developing chemistry in the field between each other, but also he's just such an organizer of the offense. And even though Josh, I mean, I think he's the 2nd youngest player on the Summer League roster. Is that right?
He might be. He's younger than Chet.
Yeah, I think Usman just turned 19, but so I mean, it's like you forget Josh Giddey's that young because he carries himself like he's like a veteran. But again, I just think that being very intentional with that sort of thing, having a player like Josh there, and then Josh is obviously not going to play in every single Summer League game. Nobody does. And then you have a more veteran ball handler like Abdul Gaddy, who's been part of the program. He's played in Summer League, played with the Blue, so like he knows what he's doing, and he's going to be able to. You can kind of transition it over to him, and that type of intentional approach, I think, is just a really smart thing to do.
Since we're talking about Josh, you guys are boots on the ground, but from the viewer's perspective here at home on the TV, it looks like he's been putting in some work in the weight room. Is that showing up for you guys in Salt Lake?
I think we knew even when he was drafted that he had the frame to potentially fill out. I mean, that's something that the Thunder front office talked about, is like, in a few years, this guy is not only going to be like a tall point guard, he's going to be a big point guard, like, and hard to move. There was one play last night against Memphis where he absolutely buried his man in the post, and he just walked him right down, went right up over Dakota Mathias, who really stood no chance. And Mathias is not a small guy. I think he's like 6'5", 215. And Josh Giddey, who's a point guard, walked him right down to the block and scored easily over him. And I think that's kind of an untapped skill set that the Thunder hasn't necessarily utilized in the same way. I mean, you think about the way that Josh can orchestrate as a passer from the top, playing in pick and roll, on sideline on bounce plays. The Thunder really has not explored him as a passer out of the post. So that could be another dynamic wrinkle that we see this upcoming year. I don't know if we'll see post-up play very often, but it's something different to throw if teams are going to maybe put a much smaller guy on Josh Giddey. So, go ahead, Royce.
Well, I was going to say, just to add to that, Nick, I mean, there were so many drives, especially in the Memphis game. Josh didn't shoot the ball that great from outside. And, Josh, that's not a primary element of his game, is to be a spot-up shooter, but he quickly identified that he was going to have the ability to drive. And like you're saying, Paris, he was getting right through people at the rim and drawing contact. I mean, that's the way so often you get to the free throw line, is with your physicality. Josh is not somebody that's ever going to shy away from contact. He's going to try to go up and through people. But I also just think to me, it really that additional strength is going to reveal itself on the defensive end. I think, Josh is already a really smart rebounder. But there was a moment in the game last night. I think it was one of those moments, Nick, it caught your attention to just how Josh stands above people. It was like a long rebound, and the way Josh reacted to it. It was late third quarter when everybody was tired, and Josh was just kind of first to the ball, but he took a little bit of a bump. And it's that little additional strength there where he's the guy that's taking the bump but getting the ball. And it's those little details that can really start to shine when you've added in that extra strength.
We talked about it in our Summer League preview podcast about the things that we were looking forward to seeing. And that one, the physical gains that these guys were going to be able to make over the offseason, that was something I was really looking forward to. So really cool to see that element play out in these first 2 Summer League games. It's time now to start looking into the overall team themes. But before we get into that, let's take a short break and we'll come back right after this.
COOP Ale Works is the proud sponsor of Thunder Basketball Universe. Brewers of the fan favorites F5 IPA and 99-calorie Ice Chest IPA. You'll find those and many more COOP beers at retailers across Oklahoma. Learn more at CoopAleWorks.com.
Well, there's a lot of things that have stood out so far in these first two games. And we all know rule number one of Summer League is don't overreact to Summer League. But it is clear that there are some fundamentals that are being established right here, right now for this Thunder group. And Nick, it reminds me of something that you said. I was thinking back to the press conference right as the rookies were being introduced to the Oklahoma City kind of fan base and community. You said the first thing that this group is going to be indoctrinated with is defense. And that is going to be something that the Thunder wants to hang their hat on every single night. And it came out of the gate strong in that Utah game. Very first quarter, held Utah to just 9 points, shooting 11% from the field. And it just, from my viewer perspective through the TV, the thing that stood out, there were just arms everywhere. There was a whole lot of length out there on the floor.
Paris, there was the best weak side defensive rotation that I've ever seen in a Summer League game that the Thunder executed in that very first game against Utah. And it was with two rookies. It was J-Dub and Ousmane Dieng, and they did what's called an X out on the weak side where, there's a help defender that's coming over and crashing into the middle of the lane, and then another guy that's one pass away on the wing. And the guy that's one pass away on the wing actually rushed to the corner when that cross-court pass went to the corner, got a stick hand up and defended, made sure that shot didn't go up. And then the guy that was down on the block, he raced up to fill the spot that J-Dub left, so that was Ousmane Dieng. And he was able to get out and contest a shot there as well. And it was like such a perfect defensive rotation. I couldn't believe it with two guys that have never played an NBA game before. And so to that point, there was so much to like about what the Thunder has done defensively so far. 9 points in the first quarter for Utah. Both teams, Utah and Memphis, held well below 40% shooting, as we mentioned before. And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Chet Holmgren, who was a menace at the rim with block shots in both games, but showed the ability to block at the rim on jump shots and alter shots as well. And Royce, maybe to tee you up a little bit on the touching on the point that you were making earlier, it's not that he only can play one defensive style. It's not like he's only sitting back in drop coverage and just waiting for guys to be funneled to him at the rim. He showed the ability to play other defensive coverages throughout the course of these two games.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. And, a standout play for me specifically from Chet was he switched on to Jared Butler, who is an NBA caliber player. I think he was the most outstanding player in the Final Four for Baylor. Really good guard, really quick. And Chet was guarding him on the perimeter, and Butler drove downhill at him. And Chet was able to kind of corral the drive, force a dump-off pass. And you could just see the instincts of Chet right there. I think he dropped off to Vic Law. And Chet was immediately just kind of shifted over, flowed right into that, and was able to block that shot. And that was one big stand-up play. Another one was a minute into Chet's first game when Kofi Coburn had him kind of on the block. And, so much is made about Chet's frame and how he's going to handle that sort of thing. And one of, I think, the really unique elements of Chet Holmgren is that he is not kind of what you're saying, Nick. He's not like a weak side shot blocker. He's not a guy that's just going to come crashing over and just kind of catch you off guard because he's going to surprise you with his length. A lot of times weak side shot blocking is a risk reward proposition. Sometimes you can get caught on it. They can drop it off on you. You're out of position. You're out of position to rebound as well. I think one of the things that makes Chet very unique is he blocks the shot of the guy that he's guarding a lot. Yeah. And you don't see that a whole lot in the NBA. So that was one of the big takeaways I had, but just kind of on top of it with what you were talking about, Paris, and just kind of the defensive scheme. The Thunder last season, as we all know, they were a top 10 defensive caliber team for a lot of the year before injuries kind of caught up to them. So I think and there's obviously, you can't just lean on that and say, well, top 10 defense, we're going to be that again. They all understand that there's kind of a reset button that needs to be hit. But on top of that, there's also going to be, I don't want to say a schematic change, but they have a new thing that they didn't have last year. They have a more traditional rim protector. Yeah. The Thunder were able to put together, kind of shockingly, based on incredible effort and some really tenacious perimeter defenders, that top 10 defense, and they did it non-traditionally without a classic rim protector, even though Darius Baisley, I think, is super underrated as a guy that ended up protecting the rim quite a bit. But now you've got a guy like Chet Holmgren, so that can just enhance that. But you've also got to sort of rethink how you're going to defend because you do have this new thing. to integrate there. And even guys like Ousmane Dieng, he's big and tall and can protect the rim a little bit. So I'm really interested to see how that kind of factors in as the team progresses through the rest of the summer and gets towards training camp.
And even beyond just rim protection, it was obvious that the length that the Thunder has on the roster, even with, there was a lineup where, J-Dub was the shortest person out there, but he's got that 7'2" wingspan. And you could tell that the length on the perimeter was really causing a lot of disruption, a lot of problems for Memphis's offense. And you could tell too, also in that Utah game, clearly that the blocks and the length were just causing a lot of disruption. But that defense, that front line defense really on the perimeter can be a really big asset for this group moving forward. And it's really cool to see these guys be integrated into that now, but also play it really well schematically and kind of pick up on that really early so far in Summer League.
Yeah, I mean, it's very encouraging to have not only the physical tools, right? You think about, I think at least 3, maybe all 4 of the Thunder's draft picks from this year have wingspans over 7 feet.
Yeah.
And so you start to tally those up, and if you got 5 guys with 7-foot wingspans on the floor, that's like 35 out of the 50 feet wide that the court is. So you're taking up a lot of space there.
It's that game, Nick, when it's like you stand side to side. Red Rover.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is a Thunder defensive scheme.
Exactly. So it's one thing to have that, but it's another thing to actually integrate it into the game. It's something that, Paris, you and I and Royce, we all talk about is it's great to have athleticism, but can you get the athleticism into the game meaningfully? And I think that's something that we saw defensively over the first couple games here is like that size and length. It can actually, that these guys possess because of their basketball IQ, because of their ability to be in the right position. Most of the time, yes, it is so early here and there are going to be ups and downs to all of this. But as of right now and what we've seen, it's clear that these guys are capable of being in the right spots in the right time and then letting their natural gifts do the work after that.
That led to a lot of steals, a lot of fast break opportunities, which transitions, no pun intended, perfectly into offense. Now, this is an element where pace and tempo were front and center for the Thunder on that end of the floor. You could clearly tell that that's how they want to play. And really, this is nothing new for the Thunder. This is how they've always wanted to play. This is how they tried to play last year as well. Just kind of play more rhythms and really get into the flow of the game. Get steals, let your defense flow into your offense. And we really saw that on display in these first 2 games.
Yeah, there wasn't a ton of like play calling going on, like guy dribbling it up with the finger in the air. I don't even really remember seeing that at all. And so it's kind of like what you're saying, Paris, that this team wants to play in a rhythm. And there was definitely, very specific situations where that happened, where the ball just kind of flowed around the perimeter a little bit. Wasn't necessarily like, just like eye-popping ball movement, but everybody's kind of touching it. Some quick cuts, some quick movements. One play that sticks out in my mind was Ousmane Dieng hit a 3 off of one early fourth quarter against Memphis. It was exactly that. It was almost like the shoot-around drill where it just kind of everybody hits it a little bit of a cut off the ball, and then he caught it and he was just in rhythm and he shot the ball. And that's one of the beautiful things of basketball is that like you can draw up a beautiful play, but like if the rhythm's not right to it, if the pass is not in the right location and not quite on time, just something as simple as it being on time and on target and everybody in rhythm can generate a good shot. And that's kind of what the Thunder are going for in a lot of those areas is where you're developing that timing with each other where it feels very natural. And again, to me, like there's so much attention on Chet Holmgren, and that's what's so impressive to me about him as a young player. And like Nick said, there's going to be so many ups and downs. This is 2 summer league games in, but he is clearly somebody that wants to fit within that mindset.
Yep.
He's not trying to break outside and say like, okay, all you guys are going to play in a rhythm, but when the ball hits my hands, it's my time, And so like he's not pulling out the saxophone and hitting the jazz solo, out of key. He's trying to stick with the band, and so I think that's a really impressive element. And one of the big reasons I think the Thunder really zeroed in on him as their choice at number 2 is because he has that sort of mindset. He showed it at Gonzaga last year as somebody that understood he was playing next to an All-American and Drew Timme, and he was going to identify the places that he can most impact the game. I've seen a lot of people talking about Gonzaga and Mark Few and saying, why didn't Mark Few let Chet Holmgren play like this? It's because Chet Holmgren wanted to be a huge beneficial piece to what was the number one team on the country all season long. I think that what they were doing was working pretty well, and that's because Chet Holmgren has that mindset.
Yeah, Royce, I'm so glad you brought up that play that you mentioned earlier in the early fourth quarter. It came out of a timeout by Summer League head coach Cam Woods, and it was just such an epitome of how the Thunder wants to play, but an example of what we talked about earlier. Like, this is not your dad's Summer League anymore. Like, you would never see a play like that with that type of ball movement, that type of pacing and tempo, and extra pass after extra pass after extra pass. And it landed in a guy's hands, Ousmane Dieng, who is still developing and working on that 3-point shot. You think about J-Dub, Jalen Williams, like, he is a proficient, seasoned 21-year-old scorer that had the ball in his hands at all times for multiple years in a row at Santa Clara. Ousmane Dieng, this is a guy who is still like finding himself as an NBA player and is going to be a developmental player over the course of time with incredible tools. To get a guy like that in rhythm and continue to build his confidence by getting him an easy catch and shoot look like that on the left wing, and to see him knock that down the way that he did, that's going to mean so much to a guy like that, as opposed to sticking him in the corner and say, hey, you just wait there until you get the ball, and then the one time you get to touch it, you better launch it and you better make it.
Right.
That is, from a cultural standpoint, there's such a massive gulf between those two philosophies, and the fact that the Thunder is initiating that at this early stage of the process is only going to help these guys feel better about themselves as players.
Yeah, but the other thing they're initiating, obviously, is ball movement. And to go back to pace and tempo for a second, the other thing that really helps with this is that there were several different guys bringing the ball up the floor at any given point. Off defensive rebound, immediately get it up the floor. Don't have to wait necessarily for an outlet pass. Go ahead and get the ball up the floor, and everybody kind of fall in line. That really does help to generate some of that rhythm. And when you're in that half-court setting, moving the ball, finding the open guy, that keeps everybody involved. The Thunder had 23 assists, I think, against Memphis, 5 guys in double figures. So you can tell that brand of Thunder basketball is starting to really come together for these young guys early. So that's really encouraging to see so far.
That's a great call, Paris, because that is obviously a huge emphasis, is to have 5 players on the court that can basically grab and go.
Yep.
We even saw Jeremiah Robinson Earl did it a couple times. He's done it, and he did it last season, but clearly I think there was a new kind of assertiveness and confidence for him to do that sort of thing. Players are being empowered to say, you grab that rebound, let's start. And it's not like they're trying to like breakneck out and they're picking their spots, but it's more of just a natural cadence of how we're going to get into our offense, and that we don't have to go, all right, where's Mr. Point Guard at? I need to throw him the ball so that he can put a finger up in there and we can start this thing. Like, that's just not the Thunder. Again, that it's just a way to encourage that rhythm and timing is exactly what you're saying, Paris. And to have guys like Chet Holmgren to be able to do that, J-Dub is obviously his length. He's a really good rebounder. You've got so many different players. Poku can do it. Down the line you go. It also just catches the defense off guard.
Exactly.
There was a couple times where Chet just kind of dribbled the ball up, and I was like, I guess, the defense is trying to find their matchups and get into their shell. And Chet's like, well, I'm wide open at the top of the key right here. Exactly. They weren't expecting me to be here. That's a great call there.
Yeah, so a lot of encouraging signs so far from this group. And so far, really great to see that they're getting the foundations of this Thunder basketball already in motion. Been really fun to watch, and we've seen a lot of different rotations so far, a lot of different guys getting in on the action. So really good stuff so far. And just 2 Summer League games in, but there is still one more game left in Salt Lake City. Like we mentioned, we're recording this on Thursday, July 7th. So what's on tap for the Thunder tonight? At 5 p.m. Central Time, the Thunder will take on the Philadelphia 76ers, and that game will be on NBA TV. I know Royce and Gallo will both be there watching, so be on the lookout for some content from them as well. Then after that, the team heads out to Vegas, where all 30 teams will be participating, and I'll be there as well. I know we're all looking forward to that. That one's always a fun Summer League. Royce, I know you're probably looking forward to that one too.
Absolutely. I've never been to Vegas Summer League. This will be
Really?
my first time. Yeah, the only Summer League I've ever went to was Orlando, back when they had it in Orlando, which, again, kind of like we were talking about earlier, was just a much different approach. It was like in their practice facility. There weren't any fans in the crowd. Now they're being played in NBA arenas, and like there's just such a kind of a higher level approach being taken to Summer League than there necessarily was. So I'm excited to go to Vegas and just kind of experience the whole the whole thing. I've never even been to Vegas either, so I don't even know what that'll be like. Vegas is not a place for Royce Young. I can tell you this. I already know it in my heart that like I'm not going to fit in very well in Las Vegas.
Paris will take good care of you. She'll make sure that you get everywhere you need to go, that you don't get lost in the sea of slot machines and all that stuff, and you focus on the basketball, Royce. That's right. What you're there for.
I assume so. I in my mind, I'm just imagining just like Celine Dion is just going to be singing right there, and then Garth Brooks' show is going to be right there. There's going to be like a tiger walking down the strip. I don't even know what it takes.
Cirque du Soleil is around every corner, basically.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But one piece of advice: pack for hot weather. It is going to be toasty out there in the desert.
It's dry heat, and that's what they say. It's dry heat.
It's an oven, basically.
Yes. It's the big one. Be fine.
All right. Well, the full Summer League schedule is online at OKCThunder.com, and be sure to follow at OKC Thunder on all social channels for all content and information from this group leading into the rest of Summer League. Until then, thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time, Thunder up and catch you later.